Hello, everybody. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing great. And as always, I'm back with another video and back with another topic of discussion for all of my athletes or for whoever's interested in understanding how the mind of an athlete works. Today, we'll be talking about listening to your gut feeling. And that's obviously a very important thing because that's something we all have when we're faced with a specific situation. Our gut feeling is kind of like a sign that our body or that our spirit is sending to us, which allows us to either make a good decision or to prevent something bad from happening. I'm sure that we all have personal examples of a time where listening to our gut has helped us in the long run. Maybe you were meant to go somewhere, maybe you were meant to accept something, maybe you were meant to start working with someone, start a specific venture, and you may have felt like, okay, this is the right thing to do. It just feels natural, it feels smooth, or this doesn't feel right. Despite a number of different factors making you feel like, okay, this should be the right thing, you deep down just felt like, this is not really cutting it. You went against it, and sure enough, it turned out to be the right decision to make. Why am I talking about this today? I'm talking about this because I know that a lot of us athletes do not listen to our gut feeling as much as we should when it comes to progressing in our sport. We don't have as many opportunities, and we can be in situations where we know that something isn't for us, but because we don't have that many opportunities, because we don't have that much time, we can tend to ignore our gut feeling, which is very important, and in the long run it can end up costing us. So we have that in our day-to-day lives. It's a very common thing that we have. It's a very common thing that helps us deal with life. But I know that it's also something that we need to capitalize on to deal with our careers in sports. The number one issue encountered is confusing your feelings that are based on preconceived ideas, notions, or constructs with your gut feeling. Now, when you're making a decision, if you're basing that off of a preconceived idea that you have of that thing that you're going after, or of that person that you're about to work with, or of that place that you're about to step into, it can push you to make a decision out of fear or simply act off of excitement or joy without regarding everything that comes with it, positive or negative. It's important not to confuse both, because the basis from which you're going to take that decision is very important. If you're making that decision because obviously in the physical realm there's a lot of things that align with it, but internally you clearly feel like it's not for you, you should reconsider it. Whereas if it feels right, but maybe you just are fearful of what you're stepping into, which is a completely normal feeling to have, no matter how passionate you are about what you're doing, no matter how easy or hard it may seem, those are just wavering emotions that come and go, even as you play your sport, which I'm pretty sure all of us are very passionate about. We all have thoughts of quitting or giving up on a regular basis, but that doesn't mean we do it. Whereas if your gut is strongly pulling you towards accepting or declining something, usually that feeling that you have stays with you. Whether it's before, after, or during the process of you being in that which you accepted, you still feel that. And it's important not to confuse both, because when you do that, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now, the second issue is a continuation of the first one, but I'm pointing this out because this is the main one. I mean, you can take it from both sides, But this is the main thing that gets us as athletes. And it's accepting something that you know is not for you, but that you're kind of forcing, maybe because you don't have as many opportunities, or maybe because you feel like time is running out for you. I think there's a very fine line not to cross in between taking a decision because from a logical standpoint it makes sense. Obviously, you have to look at everything that's on the table and ask yourself, does everything make sense? There's nothing wrong with that. I think we have our brain for a reason, we have our logic for a reason, and we should use it. But if it gets to the point where you know something is not right and you kind of trick yourself or manipulate yourself in believing that it should be for you, over rationalizing something that you strongly feel like you shouldn't be doing, then that's not logic. At this point, you're kind of manipulating yourself. And that's actually a big issue for people that are very rational, very logical thinkers. I think that on a day-to-day basis, it's very good to think about everything you do before you do it. But if it becomes a thing where you're in a position of desperation and now you're using that logic to rationalize making a bad decision, that becomes dangerous. And for all my athletes out there, I think that no matter if you're a rational person or not, being in a position of desperation can push you to over rationalize something that is not for you. Now, obviously, how do we deal with this? The first thing for me is to understand and have the full scope of what you're dealing with. You need to look at yourself. You need to look at the situation and make sure of what you're feeling and why you're feeling that. Is it coming from a place of fear? Is it because of a preconceived idea that you have of that? And maybe that is making you fearful, or maybe that's making you excited to take that? Or do you simply not feel aligned to it? I think the same can be said about relationships. You can find yourself in front of a great person. I think when you look at all the boxes that you have, the person can tick every single one of them, but there's a certain feeling that comes with it. That's why you have a lot of people that say, oh, I've met the perfect person, but it just doesn't feel right. And it probably isn't right. So why don't we do the same thing when it comes to our careers? Why don't we do the same thing when it comes to even our training sessions? Sometimes you know that a specific training schedule works best for you. You feel it. But simply because you're trying to switch it up, and simply because out of fear, again, you feel like your time is ticking. So now you're convincing yourself that more is better. Now you're convincing yourself that you have to train super hard every single day instead of recovering or maybe doing some active recovery, right? You're now convincing yourself that recovery is not as important, time is running out, I just have to go, 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 go. And sure enough, what happens? At the end of that, you realize that that first idea that you had, that you felt so naturally pulled towards, was the right thing to do. Throughout this video so far, I've talked about rather big decisions that you can make, but it goes all the way down to the little things. Even your training patterns, your training schedules, it can even come down to these things. The second thing I can say is to not force things. If something feels unnatural, if something feels forced, then that probably means that the reasoning that you had and the reasoning that brought you to making that decision is probably not correct. There's reasoning and reasoning, there's logic and logic. Like I mentioned in the issues, if your logic is based off of fear, there is some logic to it, but the basis of your logic is not the one you want to move forward with. So even if it makes sense, ask yourself why it makes sense. I don't want to get too philosophical with you guys. I know that this video can, be a bit all over the place, because there's obviously a mental side to it, but also a spiritual side, right? Because, for some people, it's just your gut that's speaking to you. For believers, it can be, the Holy Spirit, or, different things depending on your religion. But ultimately, if anything feels forced, you don't have to be a religious person or not, or whatever, to know that it's not right. So just make sure that the basis of whatever you're doing things on is correct. Even if it seems correct, it might not always be correct. It might not always be the right logic or the right reasoning behind the decisions you're making. Hopefully this video made sense. Even as I'm making it, it's a bit, it's a bit all over the place, because there's different components to take into account, but hopefully you learned something from it, and catch you guys next time.